Good afternoon, everyone. Would you like to take your seats and we'll get the meeting on the way. Welcome to councillors, welcome to staff, welcome to the media. Nice to have the chief here today. Okay, moving on, we've got apologies from councillors Hudson, Staines and apologies for the lateness from Councillor Wetherall. I move from the chair that those apologies be accepted, seconded by Councillor Stevenson. Any discussion? If not, I'll put the motion on those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Confirmation of the agenda. Item 10 has been withdrawn. Basically, there's been some new information that has come to light and staff need to spend some time analysing that. So that item will be dealt with at a later meeting. So I'll move that the confirmation of the agenda, the exclusion of item 10, be confirmed. Second by Councillor Vandervis. Any discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Declaration of interest. Everyone understands their role in that regard.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be withdrawn from mine tonight.
So it's for Pam to note. Councillor Brown withdrawing from item 8. Yes. Thank you. So moving on to item 4, minutes from the road shopping subcommittee yesterday. Now they were circulated at community development yesterday afternoon, the draft minutes, and essentially this is the recommendation to this committee from the subcommittee which met yesterday morning, and there is an amendment, a very minor tweak on the third page where it lists the conditions of the traffic management plan. The last bullet point should read that the event be limited to 3 that the event be limited to 3 competitive car runs. It's up the board. Okay. Councillor Vandervis, are you happy to move? Councillor Wilson, happy to second. Is there anything that either of you two wanted to say in regards to the recommendation? What have you?
Briefly, for those that didn't read the newspaper report, we have a unanimous vote on the decision, go ahead, and we were able to get the parties, I think, to a good degree of conciliation. Most issues were able to be dealt with.
Thank you. Any queries, questions? Everyone's quite happy? Okay, I'll put the motion that the following part B item of the minutes road stopping subcommittee meeting held 15th July 2013 be approved, being item 4, temporary road closure 3 Mile Hill Road. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Moving on to item 5, the June 2013 emergency work. Welcome, Michael.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, councillors.
June 2013, cover all the challenges you had climatically?
It brought up a few that we didn't even expect, Mr. Chairman.
Probably still got those challenges to a certain degree with some of the land movement, I'd imagine.
Oh, the challenges still sit there because the land movement in itself is not all of it's totally finished yet, so we're still going through a development stage of what to do and how to go about dealing with the issues that will be presented.
Michael, is there anything you'd like to, the General Manager would like to make comment on with regards to the report?
No, I think Mr. Chairman, the report actually speaks for itself. The intent is to inform the councillors in the committee on the impact of what has been a significant event for us. It's certainly well in excess of the norm that we have dealt with in the past. And just to let you know the challenges that we face going forward into this financial year.
Do I take it that looking at 13-14 financial year, which we're now in, when you do your reprogramming or reprioritising later on, I imagine between now and Christmas or whatever, the new council will be updated as part of the annual plan process? Will that be the timing of a report to come back to inform the committee of where things are at? But we're talking 13-14 years, so I suppose at some stage during the next 6 to 8 months, a report will come to the committee just to update the committee on what you've had to do to basically balance the books.
Mr Chairman, whether that's in the 6 to 8 months, what I can say is it will come up with the 14-15 annual plan, because anything we defer and peel back in this current year would have an impact on the subsequent year's budgets. So it's more likely to come around that time rather than in an interim phase.
Thank you. Questions, Councillor Brown?
My question really relates to the cost, and I'm aware that it's coming up F&S tomorrow, that we're able to cover the cost, the known cost to date in this year's budget, but the projected cost for next year will have to then be assessed to brought back, as you say, for the annual plan. What's the timing that you think you'd be able to identify that quantum?
I'm not sure, through Mr Chairman, that I can really give a solid answer on that. Certainly the estimates are estimates at the moment until we uncover everything and get to the grips of exactly what we need to do and the cost of those. And until we've got those, at the same time, in parallel, we're going through what we can peel back in our own budgets. So that's the transportation budgets, and then working with the finance team about the city-wide budget. We can have a lot more confidence than when I wrote this report that NZTA will be contributing in subsidies. We have got the subsidies for last year for the emergency works. There's every expectation we will get them for the 13-14, but they haven't been turned on as such yet. So that certainly helps us along the way. The subsequent report talks about St Clair, of course.
Councillor Manavis, Councillor McTavish.
Looking at Upper Junction Road, the photos in the ODT look pretty dramatic, but when I went and actually had a physical look at it, it looked even worse. Does all that cost come back on the council, or are we getting a sort of sizable NZTA?
That is one of, through Mr Chairman, that is one of the projects in which we expect an NZTA subsidy as part of the emergency, as part of the event reinstatement. And
would that normally be 60% or something similar?
It is normally the base fare rate of 50, which is currently 56%.
Okay. It looks like a very, very major chunk of road that's going to have to be rebuilt. Is that going to fall into the estimate you've got here for the coming year, or is it going to go out further than that? Is it going to take longer than a year to fix?
I don't expect it to take longer than a year to fix.
Okay, so it would be included in the 1.3 million overlay that we've got here?
It's included in that ballpark estimate that we've put together at this stage, yes.
Okay.
Until, got to say, with that particular site, it's very liquid material there. The geotechnical engineers have been trouble even walking across it, let alone anything else. So the full understanding of how deep and any excavation needs to go, what needs to move, what needs to come in, that's still a work in progress.
Right. There has been a suggestion from some locals there that it could have been averted if drainage had been to a higher standard. Is that something that you have looked at or will look at?
With all of these slips, the consideration of what has caused them is part of the process to try as much as possible to ensure that it doesn't happen again. I'm not aware of the issue about drainage there, but it is fair to say that all of these are caused by water, so drainage one way or another does come into it, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor McTavish.
Well, I'm curious that the state of the network is obviously to an extent weakened because of this event, and I'm just wondering what vulnerability we have over and above the usual conditions were we to get another climatic event next week, for example. Is our position compromised currently because of the storms that we have had and that the damage that has been done, or would you expect no more additional damage in the event that we do get another significant climatic event?
Crystal ball.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that is a bit of crystal ball, but it is certainly the wetter the ground gets, the more prone we are to effects on it. We got on June 16th, it was 53 millimetres of rain on that one day, which is very significant. But you precede that with the several days of rain we had beforehand, that the ground was very saturated to start with, so we are becoming, it does become more prone to catastrophic effect. So where we're at with our network at the moment, things are drying out in many cases, one would hope. Don't quote me on that. But that is actually helping to settle everything down. But we are finding that the sections of sealed road where there's more potholes. There's other things that are coming up that are not unrelated to the events before. So it does have a network-wide effect, yes.
Thank you. Any further questions? If not, someone like to move? Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to move.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Seconded by Councillor Wilson. Any discussion? Councillor Stevenson.
Well, it's just that inundation, getting wet, is going to become a more and more of a problem for our city. And so I suppose whatever we can do to be proactive, spot our wet spots where we have them, and do the drainage that Lee, you know, to be able to do what we can to prevent it rather than have to deal with it once it's fallen to bits. But it's a problem that our city's going to have more of, I think.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 6. Welcome to John Bissett and Graham Hamilton. Have you managed to get any sleep, Graham, since that whole bed?
It was certainly a action-packed year since May, I'm sure.
Is there any further comment you'd like to make with regards to the report, or anything you'd like to add?
I think just in quick overview, May the 26th, Sunday was the event day, followed by snow the next day, and followed by rain shortly thereafter. I just must pay tribute to all the teams that swung in to help at that event. It was no picnic, and we didn't quite know where we were headed when we started, but we stabilised 40 metres of wall, and it did come at a cost, and it took probably 5 weeks. At this stage, we are talking to a shortlisted consultant with international connections and marine specialty, and we hope to conclude that in another couple of weeks in terms of a forward-looking review of all the information that has been collated over the last 10 or so years. And during that time, there's been a lot of angst, anguish. The stairs and the ramp on the wall have been more than a challenge. And particularly now the base stability of the wall that was called into question. So I think standing back and looking at the whole scenario, the stability of the wall is paramount, followed by the, should I say, the filigree of the stairs and ramp on the wall, and whether they come back in the same form is to be decided. And we did approach the MBIE, the old Department of Labour, for a ruling on the ramp and whether that would still be required in terms of obtaining a code of compliance for the wall, and that had been our focus up until May the 26th. And I think it's fair to say that this review should take place before we do anything further with respect to construction, and confirm that what we have done is appropriate and what is appropriate going forward, whether it be looking offshore or onshore as it becomes one geomorphic entity.
Thank you very much for that summary, Graham. Any questions for Graham? Councillor Vanders, Councillor Wilson.
Graham, on 6.2 in the introduction, you talked about the excluding the ramp, which had proven problematical in this environment. The phrase problematical in this environment surely is just a very moderate way of saying that the ramp was incompetently designed. You can't put a wedge with sea driving in under it and hope that that wedge is going to stay there. As was said by many builders and contractors at the time, and has been proven repeatedly since, despite reinforcement. So, problematic in this environment, surely it was simply incompetent. That ramp should never have been put there in the first place.
I think hindsight's been very valuable in this project, and the stresses that had arisen certainly have challenged the design of the stairs and the ramp on that wall at that location. And had they perhaps been of a mass form and underpinned and come off a structure, perhaps we'd have had a different result.
So you don't accept that, in fact, the foresight of the people that predicted this was not fairly general, and that it is only a hindsight issue?
I can accept that it hasn't sustained the passage of time in that environment, and whether it was the people who designed it or the people who accepted it, I could only conjecture at this point.
Okay, and in the next paragraph you've written that the seawall suffered severe undermining due to sand loss. Surely the sand loss happened as a result of the absence of any foundation. It's the old biblical parable of building on sand rather than on rock. And the fact is that, and again this was pointed out in 2007, and I have a number of emails pointing this out, the absence of a foundation on bedrock is the reason that the sea was able to get behind and scale it out. It's not actually due to loss of sand at all. Loss of sand has happened as a result of no proper foundation.
I suppose I could make a finer point in that the water penetrated and the sand was able to leave, whether it had been built on rock or not. But certainly a good part of the wall would appear to have been jetted into sand, and at the point where sand disappeared from the beach, it was extremely vulnerable. So
you are confirming, however, that there was no foundation at all, they simply pushed these things down into the sand?
At this point, at that location, yes.
Right. Do you know how much of the rest of the wall has this complete absence of a foundation and just panels pushed down into sand?
I've only got hearsay information so far, and it seems that from the Sinclair pool end to the first steps could well be on rock, but the rest I haven't been able to confirm at this point. So we could be looking at the greater part of the wall.
Can I just make a comment before Councillor Vandervis goes any further? I think some of Councillor Vandervis's questioning is more related to the report that will come in 2 or 3 months' time. And to be fair to Graham, as the Transportation Operations Manager who is responsible for that asset, he's having to deal with the here and now, the emergency works. And I think some of your questioning, Councillor Vandervis, is of more of a technical nature, and I think the Council need to hold those questions, and once there has been an expert appointed to look at the design and whether it's appropriate for the conditions and all the rest of it, I think some of those questions would be more appropriate.
Okay, I'm happy to leave the balance of those questions for a later date, as you suggest. However, on 6.3, getting away from technical questions, there is a whole page of our efforts in addressing the following issues. And there's a list of issues, and then there's another paragraph which suggests other issues that come to mind. And there's a whole lot of other issues there as well. None of these issues mention responsibility. None of these issues mention the possibility of faulty design, faulty construction. There's a $6 million investment by the ratepayer in a wall that has had ramp problems, stair problems, rail problems, foundation problems, and it's had these problems as itemised all the way from the beginning. Why is it that none of the issues that we're addressing here include responsibility.
Can I draw your attention to the second page, in which it said a confidential agreement was concluded with the project's designers. So all those thoughts were taken care of and were considered earlier.
Jim, you may want to comment.
Mr. Chair, what we've tried to do with the report is to list out some of the things that are going to need to be considered as part of that report. Until we get the answer to the nature of the design, the nature of the construction, all those questions, it's very difficult for us to apportion responsibility for what might have happened in this particular event. I suppose what we've tried to do in this report is focus on understanding why it failed in that area, to get a clear understanding of the history around it, not trying to ignore any of that. There may be a subsequent decision that someone needs to make after that, but we do need, this report is really about understanding what's happened and what needs to be done in the future. That's why it doesn't deal with any other issues you talked about.
Okay, well, if I could just ask then that when dealing with all these multiple issues, and I accept there are a lot of them, that would it be possible to keep responsibility for these issues uppermost in terms of actually trying to get some comeback on them?
Certainly.
Thank you.
2 questions. Thank you for this photo dossier. Is it going to be available online? Because there are a lot of people interested in this topic, and to be fair, if it's going to be presented at the council table, I think it should be. Can it be made a link to this meeting?
Yes, I believe we can.
Yeah, great. In hindsight, taking the bigger picture, I'm just wondering if we've got other projects looking at working with sea and for climate change, whether we should, if we're going to engage experts outside of Dunedin and in this field, whether in light of this experience that you've had over May, you would consider that we should be reviewing any other projects that we may be undertaking or considering being part of or funding while we're doing this, because if we're not happy with the advice we're getting locally on this issue, I'm just wondering if you're confident that we, and Te Raoni, the breakwater there is one that comes to mind, but are there other projects that we should be considering using anyone for?
Perhaps I can try and answer that. The brief for the consultant on this particular seawall was to have someone who hadn't had an association with aspects of the wall design previously and had sufficient expertise, looking for international expertise, that gave us credible advice that we could all support or agree to. Related to the seawall, we're talking about a physical structure and a high energy coastline which has clearly failed. We want to make sure we understand that. That's not to say that the advice we've received around any other coastal issues has been deficient. If we look at the ocean beach, middle beach work that's been done using, I think, Tonkin and Taylor, which has been, from what I count, a very good piece of work. One of the things that Graham and I have talked about is we've used, I think it's Tonkin and Taylor for middle beach, ocean beach. We've used other consultants for Tahuna, Outfall. We've actually got much more information around the dynamic nature of that coastal environment than we did when the wall was originally built. We're going to make sure we capture that with whichever consultant we choose to make sure we've got all the current information already paid for as part of that mix. No suggestion though that the advice we've received around other coastal issues has been in any way deficient. But we're trying to make sure we've got very good advice to be able to give us all confidence around what happened here and what needs to be done for the future.
Thank you.
No further questions, Councillor. Any other queries, questions? If not, would someone like to move the recommendations 1, 2 and 3 from Councillor Stevens, seconded by Councillor Zet? Any discussion? Councillor Zet and Councillor Stevenson.
Yeah, I just want to say, get on with it. And also, I'm delighted to see that in the, where on page 6.3, they're addressing the issues in an order, and the second one there, second bullet point is retaining the sand at the base of the wall of the beach, for wall support and beach amenity. The sooner this happens, and we get some facts and figures around that, the better as far as I'm concerned. I have said it before, and I think it is really the nub of the whole issue. If we can have sand retention there, then it will alleviate some of the other problems that we've got. Now, I've said this before, and I've always been asked, or the questions come back, well, it's going to cost a lot of money. And I have said, you know, what is a lot of money? Now, that's what I want to know. The funding, I expect it to be a serious funding, but until we get sand back on the beach, we're going to have this problem on an annual, if not a monthly or even a daily basis. So that's got to be determined what the cost is. Then we have to put that to our ratepayers through perhaps our annual plan or whatever, and they will make the choice as to whether they're going to spend the funds in retaining the sand on the beach. The sand has, there's a lot of examples that are available in other parts of the world where the sand has moved from one end of the beach, and it's a natural progression in the east coast of New Zealand. It happens in Australia, and I can give you some examples of beaches in Australia where the sand drifts north and they pick the sand up at one end and they bring it back down to the other. And that's the sort of thing that we've got to be looking at. And this city is going to be faced with that cost if we want to retain sand on Sinclair Beach forever. And I want to know what that cost is, because we're going to have to put it to the ratepayers, and they will make the decision as to whether we have a beach at all at Sinclair or not. So I'm delighted that second bullet point is there. I put it at number 1, because the moment you solve that problem, you're going to solve all the others.
Thank you. Councillor Stevenson.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for all the hard work that you've done bringing it back into sorting it out, and I'm pleased that we're going to find out the options and the costs and the benefits for it. But yeah, thank you. You've done an awful lot of work in trying to sort it out, and thank everyone involved. And also thank you to the members of the public that noticed there was a problem and told us. It's good on them.
Thank you. Ian Cole.
I'm pretty happy with the way this report prioritises what we have to do, and I understand, I note that when these issues are listed here, that the review will look at the initial design and decide whether, or come back with an opinion on whether it was credible at the time, and whether it was peer reviewed, or whether it ought to have been expected to perform. So contrary to Councillor Vanvis's suggestion that we should be looking for responsibility, we should be looking for the facts first. I think we should be having a trial before we have a hanging, and find out what the facts were. It may turn out that this was designed within the parameters of engineering science at the time, and if that's the case, then it failed, and we move on and we sort the problems out into the future, rather than luridly dwelling on the past and trying to point fingers at people who are no longer around.
Thank you. Councillor Couch.
Well, I just wanted to offer a brief comment on 6.4, the bullet point which refers to prevailing and or expected sea conditions. I would like to see the word "or" dropped, because I think it's critical that we, if we to expect this solution to be lasting any longer than a decade, it needs to deal with issues pertaining to sea level rise and the potential impact of sea level rise on any design. So I think it's critical that it takes into account the Council's climate change policy, and as such, I don't think it's an "or" expected sea conditions, I think it's an "and" expected sea conditions. But maybe that's just for noting. Thanks, Ms. Chair.
I'll just check with Graham, have you noted that comment?
Mr. Chairman, in becoming a bit of a historian on this form, I noted that there was sand depletion in 1914, 1919, 1935, 1939, etc. And the pundits tell me that sometimes the sand goes and parks offshore and then comes back again later. So we're part of a cycle. There also was a situation in a neighbouring beach where sand was purchased from the Port of Otago, and they sourced a fine dredged sand and delivered it to the Central Wharf, and then I believe trucked it to the beach. So all these examples do exist. The question is how frequently and how much and how often. If other mechanisms can avoid that, it would end up with a lower cost, longer term option. The other thing I might say is that the public have been extremely helpful in coming forward with suggestions, and I've had no really angry people, only helpful people coming forward with suggestions, generally 2 a day. So I think that does take it into the realm of everybody cares, it's everybody's beach, and they'd like to see us win it. So that's been quite noticeable.
Thank you. Councillor Collins.
Thank you. I'm taking a step back from blame and responsibility, all those things, just to ask a question that is on the minds of many people in the city. I've noticed a few surf riders going out on the surf, but can we determine at this stage if, when the summer comes around, the general public and families will be able to use Sinclair Beach?
I wish I could give a guarantee to that question, because not only are there the surfers who are very dominant at the beach, there's also the surf club that would like to see a ramp reinstated, and they have volunteers helping from November and then more action from December. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to move forward reasonably rapidly once we determine where we're headed, but it's difficult to be definitive at this point.
So at the moment it's off limits to the public?
Yes.
And you can't say what's up?
Thank you. Councillor Brown, then Councillor Vandervist, and Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. My concern really is, well, first of all, I support the review and I support getting the best advice. But my concern is that when we get that advice, we must actually make sure that it's peer reviewed and it is giving us the requirement that the city will need to protect the beach into the future. And my word of caution is that, from my recollection, the advice that we had last time when we put up the seawall was that if we wanted to maintain the sand, we needed to build a groin and a defective mechanism. Through the public consultation, we had a lot of the public come along and said that's going to ruin the surfing in the area, and as a result, council changed its position and went away from that part of the engineering design. Now, my concern is that if we're going to play around with engineering designs that come forward in the future to meet public opinion, then we put at risk the integrity of that design and that advice. So I just really think we need to make sure that when the advice comes forward, that it's clear and directed, and that the council supports it.
Thank you. Councillor Vandervist.
Mr Hamilton has very happily been able to tell us that he's had no angry suggestions so far, and I think that perhaps this is one of the problems. Mayor Cull has said that we should have a trial before a hanging. The complete facts regarding the design of the ramp at least were well known over 6 years ago, before Mayor Cull was even elected to this council. As a councillor then, these very evident facts available to anybody that wanted to walk along the beach and see what had happened were, in my opinion, actively suppressed by staff. My calls then, back in 2006-2007, for people to take responsibility for what was obviously an incompetently designed ramp and stairs and other issues were again unheeded, and perhaps if there had been some angrier suggestions, we might have actually got some responsibility by now, which after 6 years starts to become too late. Justice delayed is justice denied, and justice for the ratepayers here, and bringing to account those responsible for the incredibly expensive problems that we have at Sinclair, and they're not just confined to the ramp or the stairs or the handrail. Every single aspect of this project has been compromised, and we should have had much more, I believe, much harder look at responsibility way before now.
Thank Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
I just want to be slightly pedantic. I'm not quite sure that the motion is quite, it reads quite well, and I should probably raised it earlier. In 2, I'm just inviting the word team at the end to be taken out, because I think it's the whole review that we note the work is underway on. And I don't think in the third one, item 2, which was referred to in brackets, is actually now item 2, because I think they've been separated out into, I think item 2 is this report as compared to the previous report. But I might be reading it wrong. I'm just not quite sure that item 2 adds anything in that recommendation, in that resolution, in that motion.
So you just suggesting just take out?
Yes, otherwise
And
it
item
won't be, yeah, otherwise people are going to
Yep.
try and work out what item 2 is, sorry. If that's okay with the mover and seconder.
Yeah, I'm quite happy with the word team is removed and the word in item 2 is removed.
Sorry, pedantic. Look, I think it's really important that we go in with the open eyes with this review, because I think in order to get the best result, the review team will be possibly questioning people that were involved earlier on. And I think if we're going in with an eye to blame first or even afterwards, we may not get the best evidence or information supplied. And I'm just slightly concerned about that as a process. I appreciate that there were some views in 2006 before I was a councillor, and I'm not trying to win any battles on what happened in the past or research that around this table. But I think we need to probably worry about those issues less right at the moment and leave that to the review team to do. And that, to that end, I'm supporting this review now.
Thank you. Any further discussion, Councillor Thompson?
Look, there's been quite a bit of discussion around the issue of culpability and what should or shouldn't be done about that, but just for the sake of clarification, it's my understanding, and I just want to make sure I'm correct, that rightly or wrongly, for better or for worse, we negotiated an agreement around any previous culpability. And that's it, dead and buried. Now, whether that was the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do, it was done on the basis of attempting to achieve the least cost solution for council in a situation where we were unsure whether or not it would be possible to win a legal fight, and even if it were possible, that it might cost us more than the benefit. So I just want to be clear. Staff have mentioned that in their report, but it seems to have slipped by some of this discussion that's going on around the table, and I'd just like to make that clear.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. And I think it probably needs to be separated into 2 parts, because I think what we've dealt with the previous designers was very much the failure of the steps and the ramp. And now that we've got sort of a bigger picture of failure, and I think that's where Councillor Barnabas is coming from. So I accept your point.
That's fine, that's why I'm seeking some clarification.
Yes, that would be. But if others have got any comment with regards to maybe the General Manager, that would be your position in terms of the agreement that we negotiated with the previous designers was focused on the failure of the steps, the ramp, rather than any greater failure that we're dealing with under the emergency works at the moment.
That's in the base of the agreement, but Councillor Thompson's right in terms of where we got to with them.
Yes. No further speakers? Just a couple of comments. I did go down there last Monday, I think it was, with Graham and Peter Standring. So I just wanted to acknowledge on behalf of the committee, Graham's team, in particular Peter. I know he's been heavily involved down there, and of course Graham has led the charge as well. And also, Graham, if you can pass on our thanks to Fulton Hogan and their team and subbies, not only with regards to the challenges they've had to deal with down at the Sinclair Wall, but right across the city in terms of the climatic conditions that have been dealt to us in the last month or so. So, no further speakers? If not, I'll put recommendations 1, 2 and 3, noting that 2 now does not include team at the end of that sentence, and also number 3, the bracketed in item 2 has been removed. Councillor McCavish.
Well, I'm just not sure that if you remove the word team that it reads right either.
Was it reviewed?
Yes, so that work is underway to retain a marine consultant review. I think obtain might be the word that we're looking for.
Retain.
Thank you.
Chair, and I just
Yes,
wanted
Scott.
to formalise what we're doing. Should the words council rather than council laws?
Council note. It's normally the recommendation or the committee, because it goes to council, then council note. So it should be the committee, yes. So that's in the three of them. Yes. So remove councillors and replace with committee. All good? I'll put those three recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you very much, Graham. Thank you. Moving on to the alteration of the name of the new road, Caledonia Drive. Caledonia, better let Bruce get to the table first. Moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Tavish. Welcome, Bruce. Is there anything you would like to add to the report? Pretty simple.
Yeah, simple, straightforward. Nothing I feel the need to add to that one.
Fantastic. Councillor Butcher.
Oh, no, I just want to second it.
Quite heavy. So it's been moved and seconded. No further discussion. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Second one of yours here, Bruce. And we note Councillor Brown withdrawn from discussion. Any comments here, Bruce?
This one's a little bit more complicated. For starters, it's the first time that we have put forward all the names for a subdivision, even though it's going to be a number of years in the making. So we need to allow for the possibility that there are maybe changes and that we may need to revisit individual situations in the future. I don't think there will be major changes, but there's just no way of knowing at this point. So that needs to be taken into account. And then, of course, Ben Lomond Drive. It is definitely the developer's preferred option. The developer has gone to the emergency services and they all have indicated they have no problem with the name from their point of view. Yeah, so effectively it comes down to what we do with Ben Lomond, whether we choose Ben Lomond or follow the guidelines, excuse me, and go with the alternative.
And it's your recommendation to follow the guidelines?
Yeah, the way the guidelines are written, we have to recommend that.
Okay. Thank you. Questions for Bruce? Councillor Tavish?
I just had a query. The map on page 8.5 or 5 of 11 refers to an Armadale Street.
Yes?
In the event that Armadale Drive is used as an alternative to Ben Lomond, would Armadale Street also change?
It would have to change to Kincaid.
I see. Thank you.
Any other queries? For Councillor Bazette?
Yeah, query I have, there is a big difference in my view between Ben Lomond Drive and Lomond Place and Lomond Street. You see I question that. I think there is a Ben Lomond Drive, there is, and Lomond Place and Lomond Street. There's a huge difference between those. So
it comes down to the way we've written the guidelines. And there's an extract there from the guidelines regarding similarity. And the operative bit is the significant part of the word should not be the same as the significant part of any other road name.
Councillor Stevenson?
I think we've got a good policy. You know, names should have some meaning to the local community and there shouldn't be any confusion. My mail quite often goes to the wrong address. There's another street with a similar name. If you have an emergency, you need an ambulance, you don't want any misunderstandings. And so I think the policy's there for a very good reason, and staff have suggested alternatives which keep within the parameters of what the developer wanted, and I think that's fine. So I'm happy to move the recommendations.
Moved by Councillor Stevens, happy to second it. Any discussion? Councillor Collins.
Well, I need to say that the reason we get our things in a tangle at times is because of emergency services. They're happy, they can send an ambulance or a fire brigade to Ben Lomond Drive, and I can't see why we should be worried about changing it either. In fact, this whole development is built around Highland Park, with the Scottish theme, and it reads well. All the names, I like particularly Smiley Place. That looks like everybody's very happy living there. And Dunedin Street would be people who don't eat meat. But it's really got a good Scottish flavour about it. Ben Logan sort of sets it off.
John Bacon's Isle of Skye.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. Are there any further speakers? Look, I accept that, and I suppose, as Councillor Stevens has said, we've got a policy, and you know, we do from time to time waver from it, but yeah, I accept that to avoid confusion, it's not just emergency services. I suppose it's wider than that. Is important. So, and that's I suppose the reason for the wording in the policy. Councillor Wilson.
On that theme, I've been rather hard on spelling on these things, and I actually just checked about Kinloch, which I would have normally expected would be an H at the end rather than a K, although I've been advised that that is a spelling in Scotland as well. But it makes sense to actually spell it in New Zealand for people these days to spell it correctly with the K, and that's sometimes policy may not always make sense on the other side of the world anyway, so I have some sympathy with that. Can I ask a question? And it's one that comes bigger picture of this, and I have no problems, it's not fair really to ascribe it to this issue. Have we had anyone write in, or many people write in, with suggestions for names for streets, new streets in Dunedin? And if not, should we be doing something more to promote it?
I have, excuse me, I have 3 or 4 emails sitting there that people have suggested things through the website. We are currently looking at how we're going to deal with those. Some of them were a little off the wall.
And I'm just reminded by the one about McIndoe's, and I don't know if they ever wrote in, but it's still one I think would be great to show, but not necessarily appropriately here. So, thank you.
Thank you. Speakers for the motion, Councillor Butcher.
It's really a question if I may.
Can you hold it to the end? Better deal with this, what's on the table, and then we'll go back to any other wider issue questions for Bruce to consider. Any further speakers to the motion? Councillor Bazette.
I speak reluctantly because the last time I talked about Scottish names in Mossfield, somebody said because I had a name like this, yet I wouldn't know what I was talking about anyway. But I'll have another crack at it. I can support all these other Scottish names for whatever reason that they've been put forward, but I really think Ben Lomond Drive, to me it's a long way away from Lomond Place and Lomond Street, so I would support the others. If the developer is strongly of the view that they want Ben Lomond Drive, I don't know, maybe they could review it, but to me, Ben Lomond Drive would be fine, so I would be voting against that particular part of it.
Okay. Any further speakers? Bruce?
One thing to note is there is no particular need for duplicate addressing with the existing roads. The design of the drive means because there's a stormwater area down one side, there can be no road access or no access to properties on the right hand side. On the left hand side they're all corner sections, so they can be addressed off the other roads. So there would actually, whatever name is chosen, there will be effectively no numbering below about 17 or 18. So from that point of view, if Ben Lomond was chosen, there would be no duplicate addresses with Lomond Street or Lomond Place.
We need some clarity on that.
Yeah, I didn't quite understand. Are you saying that there would...
I have a personal question, but I wasn't.
Yeah, no, that's a very good line, Councillor Butcher. And it just, can we just hold fire for 1 second? Councillor Butcher's question relates to this subdivision. We'll go to Councillor Butcher first, and then we'll go to Councillor Thompson to clarify what Bruce has just said.
I mean, if you wouldn't mind, Mr Chair, you know, I've been away in Australia for the birth of my new granddaughter. I've got a photo if people would like to see one. So I didn't have the chance to ask, but what is the reason why the developer wants the name Ben Lomond so much? Could you please share that with me?
All I've been told is that is his preferred option.
Are we allowed to find out from this developer what that reason might be?
It's up to the preferred developer if he wants to share that with the committee at this point in time.
Is he allowed to? Well, I mean,
For clarity, he's more than welcome to, but it's his call.
Are you allowed
It's up to you, Mr Brown.
Thank you.
I don't want to influence the committee in any way, but the theme chosen for the subdivision was chosen by my children. My children, they researched Scotland, Scottish clans, etc. around Robbie Burns, and Robbie Burns comes from the Mosgiel farm, which is spelled Mossgiel in Scotland, and so that it all relates to the districts and to the clans around that area, and so the whole package fits together. And Ben Lomond Drive is the highest part of the residential part of Mosgiel, and so that's why Ben Lomond was chosen to keep the height. So there's a theme behind it, and I did. Bruce has got emails from all the emergency services, because I asked them without pointing them in any direction, was there any confusion? They all come back and said no.
Thank you, committee. Thank you, Mr Chair. So now I'd like to speak to that. I'm happy with all the names, but I would like to see the developer's preference Ben Lomond Drive to be used for those very reasons. So I will be voting the same as Councillor Bissett.
Thank you. Now we'll go back to the seeking clarity. I think Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, I wasn't understanding whether you were saying that there wouldn't actually be post boxes on Ben Lomond Drive, if that's what it was called, or there wouldn't be any numbers on Ben Lomond Drive that would be the same as numbers on Lomond Street or Lomond Place.
Yes to the second part.
Right, so there would still be street addresses on Ben Lomond Drive, but they would not have the same street numbers as those other two.
That is correct. Sorry, I probably wasn't very clear. Lomond Street has 3 houses, 1, 3 and 5. Lomond Place has 1 to 9, odds and evens. The design of this road means that the numbers 1 to 9 would not necessarily need to be used.
So, it would have been easy if you said that they wouldn't be used.
Sorry. Yeah.
I think that's what we were looking for.
Yeah. Because we have Smiley Place, Ayrshire Drive, those first sections are all corner sections. They can be numbered off those roads. So there is no reason for there to be a number 1 or a number 3 off this road.
Right. Oh, I see what you mean, yeah.
Okay, so could we assume that there wouldn't be, on Ben Lomond, if Ben Lomond was adopted by the committee, that there wouldn't be a number on Ben Lomond Drive less than 10?
That would be correct. The lowest number would be, in fact, 11.
So, any further speakers? Okay, Councillor Thompson.
I don't know whether it's relevant or not, but do we do that anywhere else? Start numbering the street at a higher number?
Yes.
Okay.
It is policy to allow corner sections to be addressed off either road.
Yeah, it's not quite the same.
So, how we initially address it tends to be the way that it goes forward.
So would it need to be in the recommendation to ensure that it happens? No. No. Councillor Zet,
Well, just a point of clarification.
You have spoken.
Yes, I'm just wanting to clarify how we vote on this, because what I would like, and I'm suggesting that if we take the first one, which is the Armadale Drive or the Ben Lomond issue out, I'm very happy to support the rest. Can we take that resolution, because it's already been moved and seconded, can we take the first one, Armadale Drive first, and those who are opposed to that can vote accordingly, and then all the rest, so it'll be two motions.
I was just thinking, because of the debate that's been held, I don't know how you felt, Andrew, but you seconded it, didn't you? I'm quite happy if an alternate, my motion's dropped.
It sounds like what Councillor Thompson's suggesting,
yes,
so maybe just suggest an amendment and hopefully Councillor
or I'll just move that it be Ben Lomond Drive, Armadale Street, the rest would read as read. Would that be suitable? And does Kinloch Lane drop off or keep?
That's up to you.
Oh, Kincaid Street, yes, okay. So I would move instead that be Lomond Drive, Armadale Street, the rest to be the same with Kincaid Street being removed.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't understand that.
Because you have to have the right number of streets.
So you're dropping Armadale Drive in favour of Ben Lomond?
No, Ben Lomond Drive is in. Armadale Drive becomes Armadale Street. And Kincaid Street drops, goes back to the original developer's choice. And I'm getting some nods of heads.
So we're basically adding an additional one to the list, and there's already, I think, 5 additional street names that haven't been utilised, the backups, essentially. So we end up with 6.
Okay, so if I read them out again, because I think I have got them right. Yeah, so if I read them out one more time. So the first one is Ben Lomond Drive. The second one is Armadale Street. After that, after Ayrshire Drive, it all reads the same.
Yes.
Kincaid Street, which was a backup name, is removed.
Okay, so right, I understand. Yeah.
Kincaid, sorry, I can't pronounce these Scottish names, despite my ancestry.
I'm happy to second that, so we've got still the same number in total. Yeah. That's it? Happy?
I'm happy
with that. Okay. No further speakers? If not, I'll put the motions up there on the board. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much, Bruce. Moving on to item 9, which is the application for a out-of-zone water and wastewater connection to Burnside East Torrey. Welcome, Jean.
Good afternoon, Mr Chairman and Council.
It's all going well with you, with your additional responsibilities with the water and wastewater manager at the moment. You're coping okay?
So far. I believe she's pleased to not be here at the moment due to the weather and enjoying the high temperatures.
Jean, this application, we get applications like this once in a blue moon, so to speak. You're confident that, obviously with your recommendation, you're confident that this is one that we can put a ring around and say, yes, it's a unique one, and I suppose the fact that you're recommending that it be approved, you need to think that that's the case.
Yes, we believe so. Done a lot of research into this one. Unlike raw water supply applications, it's been a treated water supply. It's pretty straightforward from our perspective. The only concern around is the low water pressure in that area, which we've seen in terms of fire flow pressure. We've mitigated by recommending a 25,000 litre water tank on site solution.
So will those people in that vicinity that are on low pressure, I assume that we guarantee them a cubic metre over a 24-hour period. So we're not going to cause any reduction that would mean that they get less than a cubic metre per over a 24-hour period?
the general requirement is 25 litres a second to maintain that fire flow. In this case, it's sort of it's close to that sort of standard, but in adding this additional connection wouldn't reduce that dramatically at all.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson and Councillor Stevenson.
Well, look, this has been extremely anal retentive, but the recommendation at the front, which is I assume the one we're going to vote on, is not as full as the recommendation further on in the body, which actually it seems we just need to be clear what it is that we are voting on when we say recommendations, because it is later on in the body that it says about having a tank and consulting with the fire service and things like that. So
I totally agree, and when you do move it, you'll include those recommendations you have.
Well, I'm happy to move it and include, make sure that those recommendations are included as well.
Seconded by Councillor Brown. Thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Wilson.
I'm sorry, I'm just checking something. I'm just checking, is it 25,000 litres that we require in a subdivision, code of subdivision, or is it a bit higher? Are you?
I'm not going to be 100% on this, but I think it's 15,000 that we require.
Okay, so this is above that. It's just that I had an inkling that it was higher than 25, and I just want to check. I can always bring it back to council if I've got it wrong. I should have checked before any projects.
Yes, we'll check.
Okay, yep. Councillor Stevenson.
Yeah, the strange boundary.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, very odd boundary shape, that one. And that's, I mean, if it was done purely to incorporate a section of residential, then I would be thinking that would be done for a strange reason, but it's to gain road access, isn't it? The reason for the unusual boundary, is it to gain a degree of residential 1 zoning, or is it to gain road access, which is the purpose for the design?
So, I'm not sure your question, Councillor.
Okay, it's looking on page 9.3.
Yes.
You've got a residential zone in grey, and then green is rural zone, and the subdivision takes a slither of the grey.
Yes.
Is that to gain a degree of residential land, or is it to gain road access? I suspect it is to gain road access.
Simply to gain road access to the back of the lot.
And for that reason, I'd be happy to support it, because it's got justification.
Any further speakers? If not, it's been moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Brown, and the recommendation includes the 4 conditions as set out in the report on the last page of this. Bottom of 9.6, under recommendations 1 and 2, and then picking up the other 2 recommendations at the top of the next page, 9.7. And you'll confirm with the fire service that 25,000 is the requirement.
Yes.
No further discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. The item 10, as we said earlier, has been withdrawn. Moving on to item 11, which is the South Dunedin Cycle Network People Party consultation, and welcome to Sarah. And Kylie. Welcome, Kylie. I think it's the first time you've reported to the committee, so welcome along.
Thank you.
Now, would either of you like to make any initial comments? That's okay. That's all right.
I just wanted to point out that in the recommendations, we refer to attachments by number, but for some reason the attachments aren't numbered. So we wondered whether it would be worth referring to the page numbers for those attachments, but I can let Pam have those at the appropriate time.
For clarity, that would be good.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. That would be excellent. Thank you.
So this report is about the affected party consultation on those first package 1 projects for the South Dunedin Cycle Network.
Okay. Any queries, questions? Sarah, Councillor Thompson.
Just, and forgive me if I was hard enough reading these diagrams as this, but when you discover you've left your glasses in the office, it gets even worse. But, so I'm going to point at things rather than call out names. But on this one on Shore Street, and I understand entirely why you've recommended what you're doing, but I just wonder in terms of basic laws of human behaviour, whether in practice what's going to happen is that people are just going to barrel along on cycles through there. Can they do that? Is there a footpath through this bit, or does in fact where you end your cycle lane or your shared path, whatever it's called, does the access effectively end as well on that side?
The access ends, so there's no
Yes, yes.
footpath, and so they can either cross at the crossing point that we've put in there, to the right of that on the map, or they can join the carriageway. So it will depend on how confident they are, which they end up doing.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Just for gain of clarity, I think on page 11.13, it's worth noting, and I went over this with Sarah, that there is an existing line as you come off Portsmouth Drive that goes right round to the inlet causeway area. It isn't marked yet, it probably should. So when there's a brown spot from, if you've been going on the Shore Street, but there is actually a connection on the other side. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it should be brown right.
It should be brown right round. That isn't there, that makes more sense.
So it's just highlighting the new bits.
It's just highlighting the new bits, but it is connected. It looks at the moment that it's really unconnected.
So heading out on Portobello Road.
Yeah.
Across the causeway.
Yeah, so that is connected. It's just the map doesn't show it particularly well.
Thank you. Councillor Van Roosen.
The implications here are for a $2.5 million spend which has already been approved. Do the recommendations on 11.2, will they actually account for most of that $2.5 million? Okay, so
Sorry.
it's just been pointed out by Mr. Avery that it only accounts for about a quarter of it.
Yeah.
So it's just under $1 million basically that this lot would be directly costed.
Yeah.
And it's already been approved in the budget?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Zip and Councillor Terry.
Sarah, it was always going to be, and it's proved to be the case, that there was a difficulty with the cycleway along Portsmouth Drive, crossing Kitchener Street and then further on down to Robert Street. And there's some recommendations in there that may or may not work. For example, I believe that putting the cycleway along the Kitchener Reserve and then crossing over Kitchener Street and then coming back out onto Portsmouth Drive again, that does lengthen the distance that a cyclist will have to go. If you look at the map, it's quite clear that it probably doubles the length, and I think there'll be a lot of cyclists who will do what I'd call a runner and just go along the footpath anyway. And of course they're taking a risk in doing that. On the basis of safety, I would be happy if we looked at extending the cycleway around the wharf area and taking it right away from that Portsmouth Drive path. And then cyclists would make the choice as to whether they went on the road or whether they went around the safer way. I guess my question is, and we haven't resolved, you haven't resolved the issue with Robert Street, and I can understand why, because there's going to be real problems here because of the businesses who don't want a cycleway, and there's problems with the egress and access to that. Is there any resolution? I'm talking about the funding options and talking about flyovers and tunnels. I mean, that sounds ridiculous, but that may be a way of solving it. Is there something that anybody suggested along those lines, albeit that it might be ruled out because of cost, that would help overcome this problem?
Possibly. What we've said is that we'll go back and look at that whole area, starting from Kitchener Street Reserve, and really keep an open mind about what the options might be, and we can certainly throw those ideas into the mix as well. I'd say they probably will be too expensive, but I really believe that we've made the right decision and that we should go back and really just start from Kitchener and see what we can come up with, and we're going to involve some of the businesses down there who are affected as well, and see if we can come up with a solution that suits everybody better.
Can I ask another question? It just maybe, I mean, you've got a railway line going on there as well, and I don't know whether we have talked to Kiwi Rail and to determine the future use of that railway. It may be that we can move the whole thing back maybe 10 or 15 metres backward, over beyond the railway line, which would help with traffic coming down Portsmouth Drive and turning into Kitchener Street past what I think it's Preen's dry cleaners in there. There might be something that we can do in there and just have a compulsory stop for traffic, so you allow cyclists to go on through that shorter route, because there's plenty. Once you get across Kitchener Street, there's a lot of cycleway or width you could extend onto the railway line. And that would hook you up with the rest of the cycleway around by the wharf area.
We'll have a word, we'll discuss it with Kiwi Rail and see if there's any possibilities around those sorts of options.
Okay.
So potentially that suggested route for the cycleway it could be the result of the further consultation, because Councillor Z clearly indicate, I think we've all got emails from businesses in and around that Robin Street area that they have got concerns if Robin Street was closed, and if there is a compromise, I think that would be a good outcome for all parties. We all want safety for cyclists, but we also don't want to disadvantage whether it's businesses or other road users at the same time. So no, that would be good. Councillor McTavish.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson kind of preempted me a bit, because the only one in all of these that kind of I looked at and thought, well, that would just be totally. If I was turning right onto Shore Street from Portobello Drive, and there's a gap in that network there, I wouldn't be inclined to cross the road onto the other side of Shore Street, go back along, then cross back again across, and I guess you confirmed for Councillor Thompson that there is going to be no provision between those two bits of brown stuff on the cliff side. Is that just because there's absolutely no room?
That's part of the reason, because there is no room. Originally we did think that it could go all the way along there, and then people would have to cross Portobello Road, where they're actually crossing 4 lanes of traffic. We think the strongest movement will be from this area to the city centre and back, and so we would prefer people to cross just at the start of the bridge there, the area that we were talking about before, and so this lends itself to more people making that movement and crossing the road, which is a potential conflict point. So the two reasons combined really to come up with this solution.
That's map 13, page 13, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. But if they were to continue, if they were turning right from Portobello Drive onto Shore Street, it's that when they decided to continue along on that right-hand side, they would be in a lane against the flow of traffic. Is that right?
They could cross across the end of Shore Street, so there's a crossing point there too. Or
they could.
Kind of like
I'm just thinking about whether or not they will.
Yeah, there's a weird little grass bit as well at the bottom of the cliff there that they may cycle along. Or you're right, they may cycle against the traffic flow.
Yeah, it's the only thing in the entire lot that just flagged up a concern for me, because I'm not sure that it's a desire line, or it's not following a desire line. Yeah. So
there's quite a lot of issues at that intersection. It's not straightforward.
No.
So we did have quite a lot of discussion around what the best solution was, and this was the one.
And maybe if it's teamed with really strong signage at that point, for example, maybe that's something that will improve it.
Just for clarity, I think Councillor Thompson's got a question to clarify what we've just discussed.
Well, it is on the same topic. My 6 years study of psychology equipped me quickly for bugger all, but it did make me worry about the laws of unintended consequences, and the shorter the distance for you to do something illegal, the more likely it is that you will do something illegal. So my question is, really, it's the same worry as Councillor McTavish has, is that is this distance far enough that is going to stop people actually driving on the wrong lane, cyclists driving in the wrong lane. Now that doesn't have to be most of them, it only has to be some before we have an idiotic tragedy. But we're potentially contributing to that tragedy through the psychology of it. That's really my question. And there must be research around those kinds of things.
We were really trying to weigh up the likelihood of that happening versus it being far safer for them to cross Shore Street away from the intersection and then cross where the road's much narrower at the start of the bridge versus them coming along here and then crossing where it's much wider and the speed is wider.
But you're not a 14-year-old testosterone-soaked teenage boy.
No.
Well, thank you for that.
I don't think there'd be an issue with moving it further along Shore Street. We just need to keep away from the entrance to the car park that serves Bayfield Reserve. The issue further along is the sight distance on the corner. So I don't think if we moved it a bit further up Shore Street, that crossing point on the other side of the driveway, I don't think that would be an issue. That might alleviate that.
Well, maybe it's just something that you guys can consider.
It will be considered in the detailed design. We can discuss it. Thanks.
Thank you. We've got Mayor Cowell, Councillor Benevers, Councillor Butcher and then Councillor Wilson.
Okay. I just want to clarify a couple of things around Robert Street. We are going to have more, as I understand it, more consultation, and we are picking up on some of the local businesses to form an advisory group subsequent to a meeting that the Chief Executive and I had with some of the concerned parties. And I just want to clarify that it's not just a matter of whether you take the cycleway along Portsmouth Drive and over Robert Street or whether you take it round the back. It's a matter of actually recognising that there are some significant traffic issues around that area regardless of cycling. So the intention was to separate the issues, not separate the cycle, separate the issues and address the motorised access and egress issues out of Robert Street on their own, because they're bad enough, and then address the cycling issues. And I personally prefer taking the cycling right away from that area altogether and taking it around the back. But I'm just clarifying that it isn't just a matter of where the cycleway goes, it's a matter of addressing the very significant safety issues at the entrance to Robert Street, especially with traffic coming off the overbridge.
Thank you. Councillor Benevers.
I'm wondering if I can suggest some changes to the recommendations and wondering when I might be able to move in that direction.
Well, could you hold on fire just for a moment, because we've got Councillor Butcher and Councillor Wilson, I think have got questions, and then we'll go to you to move recommendations with some amendments.
Andrew, can I ask a question as well?
Absolutely. Councillor Butcher.
Sarah, are you going to, at the beginning of these cycle or the shared paths, will you be putting signage so that people could be given some instruction that it is a shared path? For example, keep to the left, maybe ring your bell, things like that, just sort of courtesy things rather than sneaking up behind someone and zooming past them on a bike?
At the moment we would just be putting the standard shared path sign with a picture of a bike and a pedestrian, but we can look at the possibility of putting other messages like you're suggesting.
I just think it would be a bit helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
I get frustrated when we look at one thing. It's not unintended consequences. We can't even seem to look at everything as a whole. And if I look at Shore Street on page 11.13 again, and taking up really a point that Ginty and Richard brought up, I just wonder why we're doing another crossing on Shore Street when I presume if one factored in the school there and people going to the school, there's actually a need for a crossing further up Shore Street anyway, and whether we could combine them, because it's, and I'm just trying to simplify this, because at the moment I'm not seeing where the crossing is to the school entrance, but I think it's on Shore Street as well. And it just seems to me that we could do next page. This is working. If I was living in Railway Street, for example, and wanted to get to the school, there's no crossing there for the school, is it? On 11:15.
There is a raised platform on 1114, right near
Okay.
the laneway. It's not a crossing, but it's a raised platform.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay. I was forgotten about how big the bend was. Taking that point further, is there any reason why, if you're coming along there, you can't take the food, is there not enough room for that shed path to be right down to...
On the school side?
Yeah, on the school side.
There's not enough room, it has to be on that side. The original options when we did consultation were on the side it is currently or straight through the reserve.
Okay, so when we look at 1114, if you were going to move the crossing further away, addressing Richard's issue of psychology, it would probably be where the white car or something's parked there, somewhere up that way?
There, or maybe closer to where the vegetation is.
Yep, okay.
Yeah, not nowhere near the bend though.
But then that's about the maximum room you can give it?
I'm not totally sure, but
yeah. Okay, now I understand, sorry, thank you.
See? Councillor Stevenson, Councillor Butcher. Councillor Edwards, sorry.
Is it me?
Councillor Stevenson.
Okay, thank you. A nice question about amenity, like particularly Royal Crescent and Marlow Street. You know, this is going to be quite an interesting route, and I was wondering what sort of amenity could be put in place, way of tree planting, to give that sense of an enjoyable route. So that's my first question. I have one more.
We're planning to talk to City Development, who hold the budget for amenity improvements, to see whether they can contribute anything to improve the amenity. We are a bit restricted because of the NZTA subsidy that we're getting in terms of what we can do for actual amenity improvements.
Right, okay. I don't know how to address, but I suppose I can use this opportunity to say that this is a wonderful opportunity to try and make cycling a really enjoyable option, and amenity will be the one that will actually make people aware that the route is there and that it's an enjoyable option. I can't emphasise enough, and if approaching people like the Amenity Society, the Rhododendron Society, if we need to think outside the square on how we get that amenity, I think it's absolutely critical.
So we've had conversations with Rotary, who are interested maybe in sponsoring some amenity improvements, but we can certainly approach those others.
Yeah, maybe other groups will come forward, because that's the golden part of the opportunity here. And the other one is the underbridge under Wolf Street. That is a very tricky bit, getting underneath that by, the overbridge. And if some sort of focus on amenity or murals or artwork, anything can be done to make that pathway attractive, because it's going to be a challenging one. Maybe it's more the physical artwork in a highly built up area like that. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is probably a bit of a blanket question, but let's just focus at this stage on Shore Street. With the addition of the cycleway from the Rawai Street sort of lane round to where the crossover is there any reduction or any effect on the actual roadway, i.e. is it making the carriageway lanes any narrower?
We don't believe so, but that will be worked out at the detailed design stage. These are scheme plans.
Part of the reason I ask that is when you look at the one-way streets at the moment, for example, and the cycle lanes having been widened, the vehicle lanes have been made a lot more narrow. And I just wonder how much are we compromising one lot of potential danger to reduce it somewhere else. So in other words, we're trying to make cycleways safer, make it safer for cyclists, but is that potentially at the expense of huge risk in terms of vehicles being closer together and especially when there's two lanes?
It really depends on the situation, like the speeds and the traffic volumes and so on. On this Shore Street example, we don't believe that the carriageway widths are affected at all. The one-way situation is different.
Okay. Again, looking at Shore Street, and I know that people have already touched on it, but it does seem strange that when you consider it from basically from the school right the way around to two-thirds of the way along Shore Street, that it crosses over. And I appreciate at the moment that's basically an unsealed part along there where, you know, we're looking on 1114. So it's really just down to Portsmouth Drive, that gap where there's two lots of crossovers for cyclists. And Councillor Bazette suggested, I think it was Councillor Bazette suggested that cyclists may not actually do the crossover and just run the gauntlet along the, perhaps cycling against the traffic or if they're going the other way with the traffic, but in an unformed cycle path. What is the problem of carrying that along that line there?
The cliff is really unstable and there's not enough room to put a cycleway and digging into it.
But if the cycle lane's on the other side of the street, couldn't there be modifications made to move everything over so that the line goes straight along?
That could be an option.
Just wondered, in a lot of the questions around Shore Street, and probably there are some other questions in the other parts of the network, we talked about Robert Street and Kitchen Street. I wondered whether we're really dealing with a concept at this stage, and I wonder further down the track whether you could bring back, you know, the detailed design, picking up on some of the things that have been raised today, because sort of design by committee at the moment is probably not ideal, because we're dealing with a concept, and you know we probably wanting to know what it's actually going to look like on the ground. So would that be possible further down the track?
So Chair, you wanted us to bring that detailed design back to the committee for approval?
What we're concerned about, what I think we're concerned about, is that there are a number of issues that have been raised, in particular with reference to Shore Street, where what we've got in front of us at the moment is a concept plan, and some councillors are suggesting that maybe there are some better options. Now, I assume those better options may or may not be included depending on, you do the further design, they may be included, it may not be practical to include them, but we've raised them, have a look at them, and then come back and confirm whether they can be incorporated or they can't be. And I assume with the further consultation you're doing with the Robert Street, Kitchener Street option, you're going to come back to confirm that piece anyway.
The intention was to do that piece as part of package 2, the Robert Street thing, but to progress with this as part of package 1, and we have certain deadlines that we need to meet to be able to...
Can I make a suggestion? I'd say we would have concerns about bringing back detailed design because we do need to get on with this. One suggestion might be that the chair and deputy chair be delegated approval to work through. You know, if there's a need to come back, then you can make that call. But we do need to make some decisions around this. We are now getting into the realm of, we can take account of the issues that have been raised, but we do stay in the realms of detailed designs, and then we'll just sit around the committee table again discussing more detailed design and potentially have more changes, and we could find some way through there.
It was a matter of resolving the issues that have been raised, and I'm quite relaxed about how we do that, just as long as there's a mechanism for the elected arm to have input, and whatever the most efficient way to do that, I'm all for that.
So, Mr. Chairman, my question was not to try and redesign that particular part. It was really just
Good suggestion.
it was a suggestion, and I'm not looking for anything to come back for any sort of ratification here. But if I can please continue on with that question in mind, and that is, and this is the more important part, I think, and the Mayor raised it earlier in relation to Robert Street, that part there on Kitchener Street, that if a cycleway goes in a particular place, or as in the safe area for cyclists, whereby it might be slightly longer, that cyclists, or certain cyclists, may well choose not to use that and potentially take their lives in their own hands and go on the road or the footpath or whatever it might be. That is not a designated cycle area. And my question to that is, if we are spending all this money and paying all this attention to make it safe for cyclists, is there a buy-in from cyclists to keep themselves safe? What I mean by that is, there must, through the consultation that has gone on, if, and obviously, well, it's not an if, obviously cyclists want to be safer. And my understanding from many discussions of late that we make the cycling network safe and we're going to have half the city riding bikes. The thing is, if it's going to be safe, then surely the cyclists have to use these areas. And I just wonder, I suppose, what your feel is in relation to cyclists keeping themselves safe and buying into the areas that are created in a safe way, rather than just saying, no, I'll just go on the road like I've always done because it suits me better.
You can't force cyclists to use the facilities. That's why it's important to get the design of the facilities right in the first place. The Robert Street area, that's one of the concerns we have, is that by putting them along the wharf side, some of them just won't want to use that facility and they'll want to go along Wharf Street anyway. And so that's something that needs to be factored into the discussion when we look at that area again.
There's also different types of cyclists. There's cyclists that want to travel at 30 or 40 kilometres an hour, and then you've got ones that want to be out with their children, with their families, travelling at 5 or 10 kilometres an hour. So you can't force cyclists to use the facilities. Often on shared cars they have to give way at driveways and intersections, and a lot of cyclists who are very confident don't want to do that, they just want to be direct.
I won't elongate that any further, but because I'm sure I could. But my final question really is, on the shared path, so you're talking cycleways, pedestrian footpaths, aren't you? And I know somebody mentioned ringing a bell before. Has there been consultation with the pedestrian side of people that are, the pedestrian side that are using these areas? Because I know myself from walking on Portsmouth Drive on what has been a shared cycle pedestrian way for a long time. As a pedestrian, and a bike comes past you, it scares a little daylights out of you, and if you just happen to walk one way or another at the wrong time, you're bombed. What sort of feedback has there been in terms of the pedestrian view of these shared cycles?
We have had some feedback from pedestrians similar to what you said about the Portsmouth Drive facility, that it's not wide enough, and that's one of the reasons it's included in this first package, to be upgraded to make it wider so that they can share the space more safely. The industry standard is that 3 metres is the width that you need for cyclists and pedestrians to share that space safely. And then it's down to education and signage and markings that encourage people to behave in a considerate manner towards each other.
Okay, thank you.
No further queries? Yeah, I think Councillor Vandervis is going to move something, but I sense it could be contrary to the recommendations in front of us, so I'll need a moment to consider whether I accept it or not, but I'll run with it, Councillor Vandervis.
I was going to move something, but I've been persuaded otherwise. You'll be relieved to hear.
Or would you still like to focus on the recommendations, those with perhaps some tweaks that...
I'm happy if he doesn't want to.
You've suggested a tweak yourself that might actually be something I think you could come up with.
All I suggested was, in the discussion about potential consideration of tweaks to the proposals, i.e. Short Street or wherever else, was that, as the General Manager suggested, that maybe the Chair, Deputy Chair of Infrastructure Services review the final design of the South Dunedin cycle network before Package 1 is implemented.
Package 1?
Before Package 1 is implemented.
No, you don't want to review the whole network before Package 1 is implemented, you just want to review Package 1.
Sorry, yeah. Very good. Thank you, Councillor Tavish. So, you're moving...
I'm happy to move, but I'll note that I think we just need to have those amendments which Sarah indicated right at the start, which were not the attachments but the numbers, and whether she wants to work through those
page numbers.
The page numbers instead of the attachment numbers, which...
Oh, okay.
She can just email, that's fine. I'm happy that she's got those, but I'm...
So, yeah, okay. So wherever attachments are identified in the recommendations, they will become page numbers?
Yes.
Okay. No, that's good. So under the first part of the recommendation, the lead sentence there, if we just include that the Chair, Deputy Chair review the final design, happy with that with regards to Package 1?
Yeah, look, that's fine. I was going to suggest that you change that first recommendation such that it reads, that the Infrastructure Services Committee approve in principle the following with regard to blah, 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 subject to final sign-off by Chair and Deputy Chair of ISCOM.
Thank you.
I'm just questioning the process here. Is it appropriate for detail, which is surely the province of our staff who have the expertise, to be second-guessed by any elected member who doesn't have the expertise? Surely we should be signing this off in principle, making suggestions as to tweaks or whatever, but then so long as the final product doesn't contradict the principle, then it's surely up to our staff who have the expertise, not up to elected members to decide. I don't actually think it's a great process.
I'm quite relaxed about how we deal with this, but what I was trying to do was pick up on the theme around the table with concerns about what's been presented in the concept form. So I was just looking for some way to reassure the elected arm that we could have influence if required, but if the committee are relaxed that we leave it up to the professionals who are more qualified than Councillor Vandervis and I to deal with it, I'm quite relaxed about that. But it was really whether the committee felt there was a need for that extra step, and I accept what you're saying. Absolutely. Now speaking, I assume you will speak. Did you want to make any other further comment, because it's been moved and seconded?
No, I'm
But your
as it is, I was more thinking about the process going forward.
So your concern would be the wording subject to final sign-off by the Chair and Deputy Chair of the committee. That's your concern.
Subject to final sign-off. What I'm getting at is as long as this is what the staff eventually come up with is consistent with these principles, then that's what the sign-off ought to be, not being in a position to want to change it according to what you or I or any elected member might think of the details. As long as it's subject to sign-off as consistent with these principles, then I'm comfortable.
Okay. Councillor McTavish.
Well, look, I'm happy. Well, no, I'm happy to amend the resolution in that regard. The movers also happy, but I was going to suggest an alternative wording, which was subject to consideration of issues raised around safety on Shore Street, and then that gives staff the ability to consider that and make amendments as your expertise suggests is required.
So just repeat the exact wording so Pam understands the change. So I can't actually read that because I don't have my contacts in, but the wording that I would suggest would be to approve in principle, subject to staff consideration of issues, safety issues raised with regard to Shore Street, and then they can consider those. Committee
Safety and other issues.
Okay.
Ringing your bell.
Committee, are you happy with that approach? Okay. Now, speakers to the amended. I assume Councillor Wilson, you're happy with that amendment? Yep. Okay. Speakers, Councillor Vandervis.
When it was suggested that it was subject to final sign-off by the Chair and Deputy, I understood that it would simply be looking to the staff perhaps modifying something as a result of questions being brought up today, and it would be the staff suggestions that we would be signing off, and only for the reason that Mr Avery suggested, and that is that there is time pressure here for us to actually get this happening in order for us to achieve the NZTA funding, which is about 2/3 for this. So it wouldn't be a situation, as I understood it, where Councillor Brown and I would be coming up with any cycling ideas. We would simply be able to have the ability to sign off any changes that staff may want to make in light of questions asked today. But whatever that ends up being, with whether it's in consultation with or subject to sign off, I have some more general things that I'd like to say about the recommendations and the whole process. The main one is that I'm not convinced that the safety advantages of this proposed system are going to be as laid out in item 12. I have concerns that we have real immediate pressure coming on us with unknown seawall costs, collapse of Upper Junction Road. We've got unbudgeted millions that we have to find, that the next council is going to have to find. And that to be charging ahead with a very expensive cycle network for which we plainly have no money. And this first 4 stages, they're looking at $2.5 million for. You can count that as $5 million by the time you pay the interest over 20 years, because it will all be borrowed. We've got a situation here where I think we need to be very, very careful about ticking off any new projects, especially if those projects really aren't absolutely necessary and they're in the nice to have category. For me, the 4 recommendations that we have here would be nice things to have, but given very low cycle numbers that we have, and given also that if you look at the rest of the world in terms of how they deal with cycle safety, a great deal of this is simply not bothered with in countries that have exceptionally high safety records. I'm thinking particularly of my recent holiday in Europe, where I spent a week cycling, mostly in Germany, and this level of cycleway didn't appear in most places at all. So, whereas I'm grudgingly happy to agree to these recommendations on the basis that if we don't approve them now, we're not going to get, or at least put at risk, a very substantial 2/3 NZTA funding for this project. I am very concerned that we keep spending money that we haven't got, and that we keep spending it on things for reasons which tend to be overblown and which I don't think have been well substantiated. So, subject to final sign-off in consultation with whatever, I believe we need something like that as a 5th recommendation in order to speed the process through. As Mr. Avery says, we need to get this happening. We can't afford to come back to another IS meeting to tick off the detail. So I'm happy with that, but I'm hopeful that the next council will look very closely at other stages and actually, with enough time to consider them, consider whether or not there really is a priority cost benefit to them.
Thank you. There's no further speakers. Councillor Thompson and then Councillor Butcher.
No surprise I have a different view to Lee, but I won't debate that. He's graciously decided to vote for it despite his reservations, so I wouldn't want to put him off. I do want just to clarify. He says that I think his words were that we plainly do not have the money for. And I just think, for the sake of the record, that we have an approved annual budget in the 2013-14 financial year, approved as part of the annual plan, $2.5 million. And we have a budget line included in the long-term plan for the strategic cycle network. He may well have views about whether he would wish to spend that money on something else, and that's fine. But it's not fine to say that we plainly don't have the money for it when this council has voted to put it there. And I think for good reason. If I have concerns about this and the other aspects of the cycle network, it's around whether we should be doing a greater amount more slowly to get a much better network over perhaps a slightly extended period of time, because I worry sometimes that what we're doing, whilst it will improve the situation, it isn't going, it's money we may have to re-spend again later ultimately to get it better. But I don't know that that would be any consolation to those cyclists who have been killed on Dunedin streets or harmed on Dunedin streets, to suggest that we just wait a bit longer until we can afford it. because I think if that's the criteria, we'll never afford it. And I just also want to pick up on Councillor Ackland's concerns about whether cyclists have buy-in to behaving well. I have no idea whether they do. They, just like every other part of society, will behave well in some instances and not in others. And that's why we design roads to design in safety, because we know that people do not behave as we would desire that they do. And that's how we bring road tolls down. It isn't actually fundamentally improving the state of people's behaviour. It's designing roads to take into account that behaviour. And I think that that's part of what we're doing here. And it's also part of where my concern around Shore Street is, because I'm wondering whether we have designed that to take into account people's behaviour. So I support it as an important step, and I think we've got a lot more to do here.
Thank you. Councillor Woodgate.
I'm supportive of the recommendations. And congratulate Sarah and the staff for getting it this far. It's good to see it here. I was in Copenhagen last year, and that is, of course, as many of you know, is the cycle city of the world. And they've got lots of paths and shared cycleways and things like this all over this city, and they've been rolling them out for about a generation now. And it is such a beautiful place to be to cycle around them, honestly. So I'd like to see Dunedin looking like that, the ability for people to put a hook on a little thing on the back of their cycle and put the kiddies in there and cycle off to the shops or the libraries or whatever you want to do in safety without worrying about getting run over or tooted at. So we're on the start of it, a little bit late, but never mind, we're on the start. And thank you very much, ladies, for presenting this to us, and I look forward to being able to cycle around there with my little hook up on the back with my kiddies, grandkiddies in the back too.
Thank you. Councillor Stevenson.
Yeah, thank you for this. I think I worry about the two. We've got the State Highway 88 cycleway down Port Chalmers, and we've got the Peninsula one, and the connectivity between the two. And with this, it sort of suggests going under, you know, using quite busy roads, and that does cause me concern. And when I cycle around there, I tend to go around past the P and the Q and the R shed, and then I'll skip Wolf Street altogether and take the back routes. And I think that we need to do more to promote the amenity in that area and to try and get people right away from Wolf Street. It's quite different from commuter cycling. It's recreational cycling, but we have two beautiful cycleways, recreational cycleways, that are very poorly connected. And though this route suits the commuter, it doesn't suit the more nervous recreational cyclist. So, and I think, I don't want to impinge on what you're doing here, because I think this community needs something, but if anything that can be done to connect those two cycleways, Port Chalmers one, Peninsula one, through that quieter back route would be, is it Tuesley Street and Friat Street?
Thank you. No further speakers? Oh, sorry, Councillor Ackland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a lot about cycleways that I do not support. In particular, the long-term vision of a huge expenditure, but that's another topic and probably another paper, I think, perhaps even on the next one. These particular recommendations, however, I will support, and they are for particular reasons, i.e. the Portsmouth Drive, the cycle walkway is a shared space being widened, that's my understanding, and really my concern there is for the pedestrian, because the cyclists are well removed from the road. Shore Street certainly needs tidied up, so long as it's not at the expense of the carriageway, as you've already outlined. The biggest concern I have is the behaviour of the cyclists. And if the cyclists are going to use these extremely expensive either shared spaces or cycle paths, if they're going to use them, then that's great. And safety is definitely, should be a priority of everybody around this table. But I just urge caution on the fact that, as Councillor Thompson highlighted, In the world in which we live in, some people are safe and do things the right way and other people don't. And that's why we have safety factored into our roads and so on. The difference is in this particular situation is that if you drive a car, you have a responsibility and you are liable if you do something the way in which you shouldn't. On a bike, you pretty much get away with whatever you like. Those are my views, but I will be supporting these particular recommendations.
Thank you. Any further speakers? Councillor McCaffrey.
Thank you. Just briefly, Mr Chair, my understanding is that a cyclist on the road is classified as a vehicle under New Zealand law and as such needs to comply with the road rules like any other vehicle.
Thank you. No further speakers? Councillor Collins.
Just very briefly. If you choose to ride a bike in Dunedin, good luck to you. It is not Christchurch, it is not Invercargill, it is not Oamaru. It never has been. It's not a safe place to ride a bike, but when you do so, you take your own life in your hands, your own care, and consideration of others around you. We seem to be embarking on some millions of dollars of expense to turn this into a place where you can safely negotiate your way around the city. Nothing wrong with that in the idea of it, the ideology of it. It's going to cost you millions, but at the end of the day, it is still going to be a difficult place to negotiate your way around. And my concern is that there are millions of dollars ahead for this city. And up until now, people have coped fine. They may disagree with that comment, but as a city we have coped because of our topography. Dunedin is built on 7 hills and a certain amount of it is flat. But it is a very difficult situation in trying to make streets that are only so wide now, wider to accommodate cyclists. And I think the population here, which is growing older, do have worries when they're out there on the road and bikes are coming at them from various directions. We've got measures in place down the one-way street system, and I don't know about others, but every time I'm in town I try to take note of how many cyclists I see. They're not many, very, very few.
Thank you. Councillor,
Yes.
you're
They have to kill anyway.
I saw you coming, Neil.
right, Councillor Wilson.
The first thing I want to refer to is the Mayor's start to the energy plan, where he gave a very interesting statistic that $350 million each year goes out of the city to pay for petrol. And it was an interesting observation, which I wasn't aware of the statistics. Even if we saved $1 million of that by riding our bikes, it would be justify the expenditure that we're putting in here. And I think it's really unfortunate that people haven't connected the dots on the picture that we're trying to save money by doing this expenditure. It's also about quality of life. There are people who are going to areas because they're safe to ride and because they don't have to get into a car each day and they can be connected with their communities. And I'm really sorry that that picture isn't being picked up by the councillors who have made some comments about this. I have driven around now 150,000 k's of Dunedin in my car, just went over that mark. But in that time I've seen a whole lot of kids biking around South Dunedin and on Learn to Ride programs that we are funding as a city council, and we're saying this is the next stage. Get out and use those bikeways and get to school that way without having to get into a car and connect with the people that you're cycling and walking beside. I think it's absolutely brilliant expenditure, and I'm sorry that some of those other strategies that we've got haven't been connected into this in a way that some councillors can't see or are choosing not to. What we have as a city is a cycleway that provides for 0.8% of the population, as we have been given to information about by Axel a number of times. This is about increasing the breadth of cycling in Dunedin and getting people like me back onto bikes. I biked for the first 20 years of my life in Dunedin. I don't bike much now because it has got harder, because people haven't put the infrastructure in place to make it easy to do. And I'm really excited that we're seeing that change. And I think that the benefits that are going to come from this, it will not be perfect, but it'll be a hell of a lot better than it is now. And anyone who believes that it's okay for drivers to think that they've got a God-given right to have the road to themselves and not provide for cyclists who choose to cycle on those roads, I think it's a really unfortunate attitude to what a driving licence gives them a mandate to do.
Thank you. I'll put the recommendations on 11.2, just noting that the first sentence has been modified for staff to look into the issues that have been raised around Shaw Street in particular during the discussion of the item. I'll put those recommendations, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much, everyone. Moving on to item 12. Moving on to item 12, and Sarah and Kylie, is anything you would like to say in terms of introducing this report?
So this summarises the consultation that we undertook on the whole of the South Dunedin Cycle Network and presents a revised South Dunedin Cycle Network map that we'll use then to develop concept plans going forward, and then we'll explore options that still remain at the appropriate time.
Thank you for that. Just on the previous item, Councillor Vandervis, sorry to jump back, and as the chair, I think probably the only person in the room that's allowed to do this, but he's just highlighted the point that even though I declared it was unanimous, that not everyone around the room indicated that. Put it this way, I assume no one voted against it, and that's why I said it was unanimous. Councillor Vandervis disputed that, the fact that not everyone indicated they voted for it. So, anyway, I understand that the Mayor...
That's what knows.
I understand, sorry, to jump back to item 11, I understand that the Mayor has proposed recommendations for this particular item, and I wonder whether we go to you, Mayor Callaghan, to lead in with the suggested recommendations.
I'm moving the recommendations, and I'm moving some ancillary ones as well, and if you can put those up for me, or for us actually. And the reason that I've suggested these additional recommendations is that there are a couple of constraints in the South Dunedin Cycle Network, budget being one of them, and therefore the options have had to be prioritised. And the second one is the constraints around some of the roads that we may have wanted to put cycleways on, but they're very narrow, and had to be choices made. In addition, we had already decided to approach government with regard to funding for potential pilot cycle programs in the city, and I personally have spoken to Michael Woodhouse about that, and he's receptive to advocating for pilot status for some things for the city. We just haven't specified what that would be. And so for clarity and understanding, I think it's appropriate to note the context and the future direction and possibilities of the cycleway in South Dunedin, which is why I'm suggesting we add these explanatory motions as well. So I'll just leave it to you to read them. They don't change anything about recommendations, and they, in a sense, don't add anything substantive. They just give context and a future direction.
So essentially 1 and 2 are the same. So
yes,
3, 4, 5 and 6 your additional...
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Excellent. Well, perhaps we'll just have a moment to read those. Okay, everyone seconded for those 6. Seconded by Councillor Tavish. Discussion? Councillor Tavish, Councillor Davis.
Well, I'm really supportive of these motions. I think in reading the papers, that there were a few things that were quite clear, and the first is that there seems to be general consensus both amongst the population of the general population as evidenced by the survey, which I think went through the People's Panel, that segregated facilities are most likely to provide for the largest number of people, or at least be attractive to those people. Spokes and cyclists that are currently out there on the network seem to be of the same mind, and I think that staff and our consultants seem to be of that mind as well. The quid pro quo is that those are usually more expensive, and if they're on direct routes, there is a tension between the mixed use of those areas and the existing uses, which are potentially up for disruption. So we tend to, in the existing map that we're putting out there, we're saying we're keen to go with some of the quieter streets first. We've indicated that there are some, we'd still like to provide some facilities along those more direct routes with higher vehicle numbers. But I personally would like to see us be a bit more ambitious with those facilities along those direct routes. I think that there is a latent demand out there for segregated facilities, and it would complete the network in a really strong way if we were able to provide segregated facilities along those routes. I think there's a strong case to be made to government that this, if completed correctly, could give some really, really neat national outcomes in terms of providing a pilot study and an example of almost like a test for the nation in terms of how this infrastructure can work. And I think it would be a shame if we didn't investigate the potential for funding, government funding around that in the light of that approach. So I'm really hopeful that we might, whilst we can embark on the first few packages of this work, that we might, before we get to those last packages of work, find another funding pool or a different approach which might enable us to provide those segregated facilities, which I think people like Councillor Butcher keep referring to in terms of Copenhagen. Obviously, they're the things that we would like to be aiming for providing for our community. So I think this just gives us a way forward.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
I'm happy enough with the first two recommendations, but not the additional ones. And the reason I'm not happy with the additional ones is that I don't believe that Dunedin is in a position where it can afford to get into pioneering and pilot schemes which are essentially experimenting and leading, if you like, the country in terms of cycle infrastructure. Henry Ford, and he was someone who knew, said quite famously that pioneering doesn't pay. Not only does pioneering not pay, it's usually extremely expensive, and very often the results are such that subsequent people or subsequent attempts in the same area are considerably changed. I don't believe that we should be pioneering, picking up on what Councillor Butcher said, and she quoted one European city. We should be looking at what works overseas in cities that have similar kinds of topography, weather and population as Dunedin. And Copenhagen's certainly not one of those, but some of the same ideas might apply. The idea that Dunedin can lead New Zealand and perhaps even the world in terms of cycle safety, and to quote Councillor Thompson, design roads that make people safe despite their behaviour, I think is an ideology which is not practical, certainly not affordable. Getting back to Councillor Thompson's claim that the money is there because we budgeted for it, just because it's been budgeted for doesn't mean to say it exists. We have $600 million worth of debt between us and our companies, And it's of real concern to me that we have councillors around the table wanting to spend money claiming that it's there to be spent and seemingly forgetting the enormous elephant in the room. Pioneering doesn't pay. Having a pilot scheme here, I don't see as having any value to the ratepayers that I represent. I'm all for prioritising spending and trying to ensure that things are safe, but trying to design the ultimate cycle safety city when we have, as councillor, sorry, I forget which councillor pointed out, we have a lot of hills and we have inclement weather. I don't think is reasonable. It's certainly not affordable. So I'll be voting for recommendations 1 and 2, but not the following ones.
Thank you, Councillor Bazet.
Yeah, I can support these recommendations. You know, and I think it might have been Councillor Thompson again who suggested earlier on about the delaying the process of implementing cycleways and getting it right first time rather than addressing the issue now and then maybe having to go back at some stage. So the downside for me is that it may, if we look at a pilot scheme, it may delay the process. Nonetheless, it means that I think we'll get it right. I think also in getting it right, it improves the safety aspects of what we're trying to do in the South Dunedin network. With regard to the funding, it also alludes to funding in the recommendation that there might be more funding required, and I accept entirely Councillor Vandervis's view that the money, because it's in the budget, is not necessarily in the pocket, so to speak. But that's a decision that can be made at a later date anyway, with the benefit of having the further information that will come from what these recommendations are saying. So while, as I said, it may have the disadvantage of delaying some aspects of it, I think in hindsight, or sorry, in summing it up, it will be a way of approaching the issue. So I support.
Thank you. Councillor Butcher.
I support the recommendations as down here on the paper, plus Mayor Cull's extra ones. I believe that it's an indication of this century city to have a safe, large shared cycle walkway network, and we just need to get on with it and do it. Dunedin may be an old city, but it's full of lots of young people, and there are lots of young people in Copenhagen that cycle and they have snow. It's not always about the sunshine and getting out there and doing it. You can make the most of the inclement weather on a bicycle as well. You know, just wear gumboots and hats and things, and you can still be safe because you've got a safe network. So if we want young people to come here and get healthy and bike around the city and not have to use a car or a funny old bus from the Otago Regional Council, we should be supplying them and providing them with safe cycle networks, and I think that this is what it's all about. And I'm delighted to see here that some of the responses which came back on page 12.3, the need for cycle lanes to be protected on the inside of cars was something that did come back in the submissions, and that is going to stay in here. A bit disappointed it's not right at the top, but at least it's still in there, so that's good. Thank you, and definitely supportive of the extra recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Can I just ask one question? We didn't really have much option. Just to get my head around this, we're calling this a cycle network, but in reality, the generally shared paths that people would walk on them, can we walk on most of these or not? Or they just cycle? And the main issue I'm asking about is mobility scooters, because we're still working through our policy on mobility scooters. Will those be going on footpaths, on cycleways? I mean, where would you see them coming in on cycleways?
So they would definitely be able to use the shared paths, and we actually had some feedback from some mobility scooter users in South Dunedin who are really pleased with the proposed facilities for Royal Crescent in particular, because they have problems with the existing facilities. Overall, though, the network will be a mixture of shared paths, separated bicycle facilities. We still have some cycle lanes in there, so it wouldn't be fair to say that it's a cycle walking network. It's really a cycle network with improvements for pedestrians as well.
The question is, will mobility scooters be allowed on cycleways or not?
Well, they're not technically allowed to use cycle lanes on the road. They can use the shared paths. Actually, separated bicycle facilities, I'd have to check what the legal requirements were for those.
Okay, no, I wasn't sure whether. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stevenson.
Oh yeah, looking at attachment 1, which is the, and I think this is actually a really good plan. It gives people cycle routes through, the very difficult one-way systems. It takes people around the back of Friart Street and connects the Port Chalmers cycleway really beautifully to the Peninsula cycleway. It's a very holistic plan. It covers the whole city and it makes cycling potentially an exciting thing to do. And as this is rolled out, I'll be cycling more, so congratulations.
Thank you. Well, my only comment is that the city has been committed for quite some time to improve cycling facilities, full stop, and one of the motivations, of course, is to provide choice, and not only for preference of getting to work on a cycle or recreational wise, but health wise as well. We promote ourselves as being an active city, and to have better facilities to achieve that outcome would be very welcomed. I'll go to Mayor Cal for your right of reply.
Thank you. Given the constraints that we work under as a city, both geographical and financial, there's inevitably a tension in finding, as we design a network, and finding the optimum layout and the optimum spend and getting the best value. So insofar as it's the first, as the South Dunedin cycling network is the first major part, it's partly a trial, and it's definitely a work in progress, but it acknowledges the uncertainties, but it also acknowledges the possibilities and the opportunities. And I'd have to take issue with Councillor Vandervis saying that we shouldn't lead. I want our city to be addressing its issues in a bold and innovative way, not being timid and sitting on our hands and worrying that we won't get it right. Of course we won't get everything right. But we will have a good crack at addressing the issues that we have. And we know there's a need. There's been a huge consultation and a magnificent response to that consultation where we identified enormous latent demand. And innovation can be taken further. There are no, Councillor Collins mentioned the geographical constraints of our city. There are no geographical constraints that can't be overcome. Not long ago, we were enlightened about the possibilities of electric bicycles. Now, I can't remember who it was. That's right, it was Councillor Vandervis who explained to us the innovative possibilities, the bold opportunity that electric bicycles presented to Dunedin, and I think we should grasp those opportunities with both hands. As far as the value is concerned, this is not a big spend. It's quite a modest spend given what we're getting for it. And given that NZTA is providing so much of the subsidy to go along with it. Even in terms of safety alone, we have shown that it is a very good spend, given that one life is estimated, if you can put a financial value on a human life, at about $4.5 million. And we're getting most of the network for that. And in addition to the safety, we're getting all of the amenity upgrade, all the tourist attraction, etc., and the commuter attraction that goes with it. So this is actually very good value for money. So this council is achieving a really positive, innovative amenity, and we are reducing our debt at the same time. We are doing pretty well with this, and I commend it to everyone.
Thank you. I suggest I'll put recommendations 1 and 2 first, and then we'll deal with 3, 4, 5 and 6 all together. Is that everyone happy with that? Okay, recommendations 1 and 2, I'll put. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And recommendations 3, 4, 5 and 6, I'll put those. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
No.
Do you want that?
No, please.
Noted. Thank you, Ben. Well, that concludes the meeting apart from items for consideration by the chair. Councillor Tavish, I sense you have something.
Well, I just was going to raise it as a subsequential motion, but I thought I would just flag it for you instead, Ms. Chair, and that is, I think given the regularity with which we breach our road naming policy, I think that it would be worthwhile considering whether or not it's fulfilling the needs of the next council when it is appointed, because I just don't see the point in putting a whole load of staff resource into doing something which we regularly breach.
Thank you.
That's democracy, honey.
I'll put that on the list for the next triennium for the new committee.
Not for that.
Any other items?
10 minutes.
A 10-minute break and P&E will begin. Thank you very much, everyone.